My 18-year-old student offered to walk me home, but we ended up inside. No one has ever gazed at me like that before, particularly not someone so much younger than me. A woman like me. Abundant in all the unexpected ways, unseen for as long as I can recall. Yet, that night, his hands conveyed a contrasting tale. His lips, his breath, the way he savored each moment. He made me feel desired, essential, and for the first time in my life, I allowed myself to embrace that belief. I have consistently been disregarded. Throughout my life. From the innocence of childhood to the complexities of adulthood, I have lingered on the periphery of recognition, acknowledged only when deemed necessary, and observed only in fleeting moments. My body has always struggled to conform to the tight confines designed for women in this world. Excessively large, excessively soft, excessively present in ways that others hoped it wouldn't be. Men never glanced, never stayed. When they addressed me, it was merely out of courtesy or duty, never from genuine interest or longing. 18 nearly 50, I have come to embrace this reality. Life has been constructed on a foundation of routines, consistent and foreseeable. Each morning, I rise at the same hour, donning garments that fit yet fail to enhance my appearance. I then make my way to the local school, where my days unfold in an office adorned with meticulously organized case files and behavioral reports. My position as a psychologist is straightforward. Hear me out, provide guidance, and return them to where they came from. Students arrive and depart, positioned opposite me, carrying their anxieties, their anger, their unspoken defiance. Some clash with my expressions, while others hardly recognize them. And a handful, just a handful, pay attention. That afternoon, another file found its way to my desk. His name was distinctive. A student known for his reputation, one I had overheard discussed in the teacher's lounge more than once, confronts trouble, a boy who shows little regard for authority. He had recently reached the age of 18, a milestone that brought with it a newfound level of responsibility for his actions, one that the school regarded with utmost seriousness. A knock at the door, followed by the turning of the handle. He entered, his movements deliberate yet assured. He was tall and broad-shouldered, possessing a build that effortlessly conveyed strength. His uniform appeared slightly disheveled, the tie hanging loosely and the shirt edges untucked, yet still managed to adhere to the dress code. His dark hair was a tousled array of waves. As though he had absent-mindedly run his fingers through it instead of taking the time to comb it. He settled into the chair, arms casually resting over its sides. Legs positioned to assert his presence. I posed the questions, and he responded without a moment's pause, his voice unwavering, resonant, unaffected by the exchange. He stood apart from the others who occupied that chair. There was no compelled regret, no restless movements, no indifferent gestures. He neither battled my words nor yielded to them. He articulated his thoughts, each reply calculated, straightforward, intentional. The dialogue flowed effortlessly. Much simpler than I had anticipated, and then it was finished. He stood, stretching slightly, rolling one shoulder as if to shake off the weight of the session. He offered a slight nod, casting one last look before exiting my office, allowing the door to close behind him with a gentle swing. Behind him, the room fell silent once more, the clock on my desk ticking steadily onward, and as with each passing day, I transitioned to the next file. After school, I returned to the dorm, and he was waiting for me outside. He stood with a relaxed demeanor. Assured, hands tucked away, posture relaxed. His eyes locked onto me as I drew near. He inquired whether he could take me out. It was surprising, yet I consented, thinking there might be something unspoken from our session. A continuation of the dialogue, perhaps, another dimension. To uncover, however, the dialogue shifted to a different path. Absent were the references to familial discord, to quarrels, to the frustrations that had brought him to my office initially. Instead, he spoke of something different, something more ambiguous, more unsettled. He shared with me how nothing appeared to captivate him, how he was constantly on the hunt for something, someone, yet never stumbled upon it. I comforted him, reminding him that he was still young. That time would reveal answers that he didn't need to hurry. My voice remained steady and measured, yet he was uncomfortably close. Are you still not subscribed to Nasty Talks? Tap that subscribe button now to be the first to hear our tales each day. With every step along the sidewalk, every subtle shift of his body, he adjusted just enough to close the distance between us. A gaze that held a moment too long, a silence between phrases that expanded into an unvoiced understanding, the atmosphere shifted, his tone remained relaxed. Yet there was a purpose hidden within, intricately interlaced among his phrases. In the manner his fingers curled before slipping into his pockets. In the way his shoulders appeared to lean toward me with every word. Upon our return, I made sure to maintain my every action is intentional, and my tone remains serene. I extended a courteous farewell, a slight nod, and took a step back. He paused for a moment, as though anticipating something, as if he was expecting more, his gaze locked onto mine, enigmatic. Brimming with an emotion I couldn't yet identify, then he departed. The door clicked shut behind me, and the silence within enveloped me tightly, the space seemed more confined. The atmosphere overly stagnant, excessively warm. I breathed out slowly, bracing myself against the table's edge. My hands were cool against the polished wood, yet a hum resonated beneath my skin. An unfamiliar sensation weaving through my limbs. I approached the mirror, my reflection emerging in the soft, muted glow. The woman gazing back appeared unchanged. Her lined features and full frame draped in garments selected for practicality rather than allure. And yet, something felt distinct. There was a sensation in my mouth. A subtle warmth creeping along my throat, and my breath still hadn't found its rhythm. I shook my head, and turned away, untying my scarf with deliberate fingers. Routine would return, weaving through the creases of my mind, leaving behind only the heaviness of consciousness in its wake. The room enveloped in silence, the sheets weighed down like a heavy blanket, while the ceiling loomed above, stretching into an endless expanse that felt overwhelmingly vast. The mind tends to revisit, to sift through familiar thoughts as if in pursuit of something fresh hidden within. The past lingered like an old friend, filled with memories of averted gazes, unopened doors, and mirrors that showed a body perceived as excessive, yet insufficient, a lifetime lived in the shadows of others' thoughts. And yet, earlier that evening, it hung in the atmosphere surrounding us, that subtle acknowledgement, unvoiced yet palpable. Uncertainty, reluctance, aspects I was familiar with yet had never envisioned residing in him. The minutes dragged on, the stillness suffocating, the form too rigid. The shower became a sanctuary, the warmth of steam blurring the sharpness of thought, while the gentle hum of water against tile filled the void left by the night's disquiet. The constant flow tumbled down, mapping well-known routes, adhering to the shapes of flesh. Fingers pressed against tense muscles, working through the tightness, seeking release in the most straightforward manner. The water flowed downward, succumbing to gravity's embrace, gliding over gentle curves, gathering in familiar pools, warmth meeting warmth. The movement was natural, a subtle adjustment in stance, a separation of limbs. The sensation of warm droplets hitting the spots where tension was most tightly wound. The sound of water enveloped the space, drowning out the soft breaths that became increasingly irregular. The heartbeat quickening just slightly beneath the moist skin. The feeling was anticipated, rehearsed. It was a process, not a fleeting instant. The body reacted as it always did, moving to a rhythm that required no contemplation, no expectation. A shift of the hips, a gentle inhalation, a well-known clenching deep within the abdomen. The frigid air from the spray sent shivers racing across damp skin, a stark contrast to the warmth blossoming deep within. It was a quick process, not once. A tight grip. A moment of pressure that lingered just a heartbeat too long, and then it was over. A brief, pointed peak, nothing else. No lingering satisfaction, no slow unraveling of pleasure, just the quiet, fleeting relief of something released, of muscles unclenched, of a breath exhaled. The water flowed steadily downward, erasing the final remnants of tension. The night lingered, yet the body found its tranquility, the mind settled into stillness, and before long, sleep embraced me. The corridors were almost deserted by the moment I collected my belongings. The evening had unfolded longer than anticipated, hours drifting away beneath piles of forms scattered across the desk. the soft buzz of fluorescent lights enveloping the space. A heavy presence that lingers, the school stood silent, stripped of its typical turmoil, with only the faint sound of my footsteps resonating in the stillness as I secured my office door. And then I laid my eyes upon him. He sat just outside, leaning forward slightly, with his elbows resting on his knees, and his fingers loosely intertwined, the stance of an individual in anticipation. Of one who had lingered far beyond the appropriate duration. The faint illumination of the corridor lights stretched elongated shadows over his figure, sharpening the angles of his face, capturing the tousled strands of his dark hair. I heard you had a lot on your plate, so I thought it best not to let you come home alone at such a late hour. His voice carried a certain smoothness. Yet the flexing of his hands and the gentle tapping of his foot against the linoleum revealed an underlying tension. A subtle thrill, a vibrant pulse that lingered just beneath the surface. A sudden spark ignited within me, the question taking shape before I could hold it back. What led you to conclude that no one was able to take me home? The words weren't truly intended for him. More an unvoiced thought became a sound, yet he responded nonetheless, with that same subdued fervor, that same peculiar assurance. You, Miss Delvey, are not Mrs. There was something intentional in the way he articulated it, a distinction made with thoughtful precision. His gaze remained unwavering, firm under the flickering light of the hallway. I observed you. You consistently return home by yourself, that is the reason. A pause, a breath, a moment that lingered endlessly, thickened with an unarticulated weight. I didn't want you to head home by yourself once more. It was an odd occurrence, how his presence occupied the void. He was young, brimming with the audacity and freedom that youth brings. Enveloped daily by girls who flaunted their youth with abandon, as if it were an eternal gift. And yet here he stood, not at a gathering, not slipping into the night with a girl his own age, but anticipating. For myself, are you interested in supporting the girls and the channel to enjoy the videos daily? Your generous donation of any amount at the link in the description would be greatly appreciated. The understanding lingered at the boundaries of contemplation. Too ridiculous to grasp. Too peculiar to overlook. Outside, the night air was cool, the weight of the day still resting on my shoulders as I exhaled. The parking lot lay before us, still and empty, with only the soft hum of streetlights piercing the silence. I ought to have brushed it aside, to have moved forward without uttering another word, to have allowed the night to envelop me without a backward glance. However, I did not. Instead, I aligned my steps with his as we ventured into the shadowy street, toward the mysterious void that lay between the conclusion that should have been and the unexpected beginning that had somehow emerged. The night air enveloped the skin, cool yet dense, shrouding the world in stillness. The house loomed behind us, shrouded in darkness, a silent expanse that abruptly felt overwhelmingly vast, achingly empty. He paused, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, his breath measured and intentional. His presence elongated the moment, transforming it into something that defied its expected brevity. I ought to have said good night, to have crossed the threshold, allowing the door to gently close between us. Instead, I welcomed him inside. The cozy embrace of the house enveloped us, softening the bite of the cold air beyond. The kitchen light emitted a gentle radiance, enveloping the steam that spiraled up from the kettle as I filled the eager cups with hot water. The air was infused with the scent of tea leaves, mingling with an unspoken sweetness that lingered in the atmosphere, and then, without warning, warmth behind me, a shape pressed close. Not quite touching, just near enough that the space between us crackled. I nearly let the teapot slip from my grasp. My fingers, both hesitant and certain, glided along the fabric that clung to my hips. A touch so delicate it might have been a figment of the imagination, yet the warmth it imparted was undeniably tangible. Fingers gliding, discovering with ease, free from pressure, free from haste. A gradual motion, an unspoken plea. I didn't step away. The warmth at my neck was subtle, almost imperceptible. Yet the initial touch of lips brought a gentle whisper of damp heat against my skin, moving lower with a tantalizing grace. His hands glided with precision, gently slipping beneath the fabric. Fingers discovering skin that remained cool from the night air. The stark difference sent a shiver through me. A gentle wave that originated deep within my spine and spread outward. Beneath the fabric of my shirt, I existed in truth. I sensed the contours of my being, the gentle softness, the heaviness, the warmth of flesh meeting flesh. The idea sparkled, vivid and clear. Yet he brushed it aside with another kiss, deeper now, wetter, the warmth of his mouth gliding along the curve of my neck, pressing open-mouthed against the hollow of my throat. I allowed him. The buttons of my shirt came undone, one after another, as the cool air explored new places to caress. He toiled with precision, nearly with a sense of awe, the fabric yielding to his rhythm. His fingers gliding gently as he progressed. I sensed the tremor within them, the subtle pause, the instant he arrived at the final button and breathed out, as though anchoring himself before proceeding. The shirt fell away from my shoulders, leaving just a thin veil between his lips and the soft curves that beckoned him, the clasp undone. Fragile as a whisper, and then there was only the emptiness of the air. When he first laid eyes on me, he felt the fullness of my form in his hands, the heaviness of flesh, the gentle curve of skin that reached up to welcome the warmth of his lips. Then, he brought his mouth down to mine, pressing, tasting, taking. The weight of his touch lingered on my skin. Each place he had kissed still ignited with embrace. His breath, now uneven, filled the space between us. The atmosphere was dense, electric, resonating with an energy that neither of us appeared ready to interrupt. I knelt before him, my hands moving with a measured slowness, unhurried yet resolute. The material under my fingertips radiated warmth, tightly molded to his form, disclosing what I had already sensed pressed against me. A soft breath escaped his lips, almost silent, yet sufficient to send my heart racing. The button slipped free, the zipper trailing behind in a deliberate, unhurried fall. The noise shattered the stillness that enveloped us. A soft rustle of metal brushing against cloth. He was observing me, his stare intense, yet I felt no hesitation now, no shyness, no doubt. I followed the curve of his stomach with my lips, my breath playfully dancing over his sensitive skin. He tightened under the caress, the muscles in his abdomen contracting as I descended, exploring uncharted territory with the tip of my tongue. Each response nourished a part of my being. Something profound, something that has lingered in the shadows of memory. He lifted me then, his hands steady yet gentle, raising me until I was above him. A shift in the air, a change in position. The couch embraced the backs of my thighs, soft and inviting, yet nothing could rival the warmth of him nestled between them. His lips mirrored the path I had traced moments before, echoing the slow unraveling I had offered him. His hands discovered the fabric that still divided us, his fingers curling into it, teasing. Testing. A draw in a breath, a whisper of air caressing bare skin. The heat enveloped me, his mouth gentle yet insistent, pressing against my most sensitive spots with a slow, intoxicating pressure. My thighs tightened around him, instinctively seeking more, and he welcomed it, allowing himself to be ensnared in the space between. The world faded at the peripheries, distilled to pure sensation. His mouth, his hands, the slow, deliberate movements that sent a shudder through me, wave after wave. I sank deeper, surrendering to it, the warmth of the room pressed against my skin. A slow heat unfurling beneath the surface, the atmosphere surrounding us was electric, laden with an unarticulated yet unmistakable tension. My hands glided with intent, tracing the contours of the fabric that shrouded him, methodically unraveling it with deliberate care. The first button came undone, followed by the second. The heaviness of expectation lingered deep within me, radiating outward as the zipper glided down, its soft movement shattering the stillness. Beneath my fingertips, the fabric felt warm, stretched tightly over solid muscle, over the burgeoning outline of his desire. A soft exhale slipped from him, almost inaudible, yet I sensed it, the tautness that gripped his posture. The instinctive reaction of his body before I had completely unveiled him. I lingered, allowing the backs of my fingers to glide over the contours of his abdomen, capturing each delicate movement, each tension and ease. My lips moved, gentle yet intentional, brushing against skin that quivered under the caress. He observed from his vantage point, his breath coming in uneven gasps. His fingers curling slightly at his sides as if holding himself back. The final barrier faded, creating an unbroken space between us. His hands discovered my shoulders warm and steady, encouraging me onward, leading me gently without pressure. He advanced with a subtle assurance, guiding me backward until the couch met the backs of my thighs. The fabric felt cool against my heated skin, a contrast that sent a shiver up my spine, and then he shifted, turning to explore the path I had traced moments before. Digits. Slow and deliberate. Teasing at the fabric still left between us, playing at the edges with exasperating endurance. The warmth of his breath brushed against my skin, first moist and inviting, igniting a wave of sensation that coursed through me. Through me, his lips traced a path, pressing and tasting, moving either low or slow, yet always with certainty. My legs tightened instinctively, my body yearning for more, pressing into him, as if compelled by an unseen force. He embraced it, allowing himself to be ensnared in the in-between, his mouth unyielding. His hands, calm as they kept me precisely where he desired me, the world constricted, the space dimmed, leaving only the warmth, the tension, the gradual, intentional loosening of control. The atmosphere. It was dense, brimming with an energy that defied containment. His hands, confident and steady, glided over my skin, outlining each curve, each dip, every spot where warmth gathered and breath caught. Fingers explored my chest, pressing, kneading, pulling me nearer. His body enveloped mine, the heaviness of him pressing against me, encasing me completely. His breath, warm and erratic, brushed against my lips, his face lingering just above mine, his mouth close enough that I could sense every exhale, and then a shift. A profound and undeniable fullness. A sudden jolt surged through me, my body bending instinctively, legs quaking, uncertain whether to fight or yield. His hands tightened their hold, anchoring me, ensuring I remained steady as he discovered his tempo, every motion intentional, profound, all-encompassing. The world condensed into this moment, his warmth enveloping me. The rhythmic pulse of his breath, the way every inch of I felt pushed to my limits, overwhelmed by an unfamiliar sensation. My fingers curled, gripping onto anything I could reach, desperate for something to anchor me against the tempest. He surged forward, unyielding, extracting sounds from my throat that I was powerless to hold back, powerless to mute. Every movement ignited sparks racing through my limbs, heat curling low in my stomach, coiling tighter and tighter, but then just as suddenly he halted. A quiet moment, a brief interlude. His breath warm and weighty upon my shoulder. For a moment, I believed it was hesitation, perhaps second thoughts, but no. His hand moved down, holding my waist, pushing me forward, molding my body into a new form beneath him. The couch cradled me gently, its softness contrasting with the firmness of his grip, which anchored me in place, shifting my legs, arranging me to his liking. The initial press of him sent a shiver through me, deeper this time, a sensation that left my fingers grasping at the fabric beneath me. Then he moved again, unyielding, pulling me into him, each movement more deliberate, more consuming. My breath faltered, my body tightened, the warmth of his skin against mine, the sound of him, the sound of us, enveloping the stillness of the room. The pressure within me surged, escalating steadily, constricting with every passing moment. His voice, deep and gravelly, cut through the fog, whispering phrases against my skin that sent a shiver through me. My thighs trembled, knees braced against the couch for stability, yet it proved insufficient. He enveloped me, encircling my being, dismantling me fragment by fragment. I wasn't merely seeking relief. This was an entirely different experience, one that left me breathless, shaking, yearning to cling on, yet powerless against the impending descent. The brink approached, a quiver coursing through each limb, a gradual loosening of control. The experience was beyond anything I had ever encountered. Intense, profound, and utterly consuming. My skin ignited against his, slick with warmth, the pressure of him unyielding, occupying every space, seizing every breath. He ascended over me, his form tense, his muscles rippling under the strain of effort. The wet fabric of his shirt adhered to him, drenched in the intensity of exertion, holding remnants of my touch. Where my body had made its impression. I needed to be close to him to truly sense his entire presence enveloping me. I halted him with a gentle touch, my fingers curling into the moist fabric. With slow, deliberate movements, I raised the fabric, drawing it over his head, unveiling the form beneath. His skin shimmered, a blend of perspiration and the marks I had imprinted. His chest heaving with deep, irregular breaths. He stood before me, completely exposed, with nothing separating us now. I sipped, captivated by his presence, the effortless strength of his form. The subtle hitch in his breath as my eyes lingered on him, but before I could reach for him, before I could explore the heat of him with my hands, he was already moving. Reclaiming the space between us, pushing me back until the cushions met my spine. His hands glided over my thighs, fingers fanning out against the warm flush of my skin. He lingered over the delicate contours, delving into the depths where emotions gathered most profoundly. I tightened under him, each nerve ignited. Every motion sending another wave of anticipation coursing through my veins. However, what I desired was not patience. More challenging. The word slipped out before I could rein it in. Unrefined and unrestrained. He paused for just a moment, and then I noticed it, the faintest flicker of something dark, something content, curling at the corner of his lips before his stride shifted. The gradual, tantalizing pressure escalated into an urgent force, relentless fingers delving deeper, searching, asserting their dominance. The enjoyment surged, escalating quickly. Intolerable in its fervor. My body resisted, yet pursued it nonetheless, tightening, coiling, reaching. My hand sought my face, a frantic effort to silence the cries that slipped from my lips. Yet it was futile. He was unyielding, and my body was failing me, then let go. A wave surged within me, powerful and relentless, altering everything in its path. A sudden surge. An intense warmth enveloping me, an unforeseen wave of feeling that rendered my limbs feeble, my breath caught in my throat. The room was silent, save for the sound of my own uneven breaths. My body still quaking from the aftershocks, my back curving instinctively, and a profound, intoxicating calm enveloped me, sweeping away all but the faint remnants of warmth still pulsing between us. The air lingered with warmth, heavy with the aftermath of recent events. My body felt weighty, sinking deeply into the cushions, my limbs loose, and at ease in a manner I hadn't experienced in years. The reverberations of feeling lingered just beneath the surface, a gentle thrum that stubbornly held on, refusing to dissipate entirely. He had not claimed what was rightfully his. He had yet to arrive at his own conclusion, had yet to pursue his own liberation. He merely sought to offer, to witness my unraveling beneath him. To nudge me toward an unexpected discovery resting in his grasp. And he had triumphed. I stayed motionless, my breath calm yet profound. My chest rising and falling in the stillness of the softly illuminated room. He had adjusted a bit, yet he remained in place. Instead, he leaned into me, his face nestled into the softness of my chest. His skin warm and damp, his body a comforting presence against mine, his fingers glided over my stomach, outlining absent shapes, wandering across the curve of my thighs, moving aimlessly. Devoid of intention, the caress was gentle, languid, the sort that held no intention of progression but merely thrived in its own presence. It felt as though he was still absorbing my essence. Caught in that delicate balance between intrigue and recognition. I ought to have expressed myself, yet the words eluded me. My thoughts whirled in silent loops. Inquiries emerging and dissolving before they could coalesce into anything complete. Had he genuinely desired me, not merely in the intensity of the moment? Not solely for the burden of my body under his touch, but as something deeper? Is it possible for him? Could he? I had never been the kind of person who caught the eye of men. Never been the woman who made them pause, who drew their gaze, who held their longing just long enough for them to crave something deeper, something beyond the simple and the ordinary. Yet he had been present, he had observed, he had lingered. Yet, uncertainty coiled itself around the peripheries of my mind. Our discussions consistently revolved around him, his challenges, his disappointments, his perpetual unease. I had never allowed myself to be woven into the narrative, had never permitted him to glimpse the facets of me I kept hidden. The fragments that defined me beyond mere flesh, beyond just an existence. Captured in the shadows. I had considered it, but I didn't follow through, and now, as I lay here feeling his slow, steady breath against my skin, I found myself questioning whether it even mattered at all. His fingers paused, his breathing softened, and with a gentle exhale, he yielded to slumber. I remained there, still and patient, awaiting the moment. 15 minutes passed, and then a shift, a slow inhale, his muscles tensed slightly, his fingers twitched against my skin. He blinked once, then twice, and then fell into silence. He averted his gaze, and there was no contact between us. The softness that once existed had vanished, substituted by an unspoken separation I couldn't define. The door shut softly behind him, and in that moment, a void formed within me. The warmth of his body had barely faded from my skin, yet already, the space he had occupied felt distant, devoid of all but the trace of his fragrance hanging in the atmosphere. The couch still held the impression of our presence, the sheets remained wrinkled from our restless movements. Yet it was merely a specter of a past, an echo of what once was mine. I remained seated for an extended period, completely still. The space, previously alive with warmth and energy, had now quieted, returning to its familiar stillness. My skin still recalled his touch, the heaviness of his presence against mine, the way his hands had explored with a tenderness that felt genuinely convincing. I thought it was true, but I was mistaken. I'm not quite sure how I discovered it. Perhaps it was a soft murmur in the hallway, a conversation drifted by, one I was never meant to overhear. Yet, the truth unfolded before me, laying everything bare. A game, a wager, a daring challenge exchanged among boys who understood. Insignificant. He had lost, and the cost of that loss had been me. The older woman, the body they mocked, the one he had been commanded to claim. It flickered through my thoughts in bursts, the manner he had waited outside my office, the careful pauses in his voice, the way his hands trembled against my skin, as if he had been nervous, as if this had been something more than merely a task to finish, and yet, it was all just an illusion. None of it had ever truly existed. I allowed him entry, I permitted him to witness parts of me that remained unseen by others, granted him access to depths I had concealed. Let him peel away my layers until I stood bare, exposed in my quivering fragility, and all the while, it had merely been a game to him, a task, a jest exchanged among his companions. Shame slithered across my skin, enveloping me, heavy and stifling. I quit the following day, gathered my belongings, and departed the town in silence. I severed connections with everyone I had known, erased every trace of what had transpired, of who I had allowed myself to become for him. In the stillness of my new existence, I reconstructed myself piece by piece, layer by layer. I had lost all faith in men. I won't be deceived a second time. Years passed, the memories softened at the edges, no longer as vivid but never entirely faded. The presence of another man never materialized, not due to a lack of opportunities, but because I never permitted it. Then, this evening, my phone vibrated. A note. I opened it. Hello, this is Kevin. You were fantastic. Are you interested in giving it another try? Enjoy this video and consider subscribing to Nasty Talks. Remember to share this video with your friends on WhatsApp, so they can enjoy it as well. I appreciate your presence with me.